Today's class is for Refuah Shalema for Yehuda Aryeh Refoel Ben Yita. The schus of our learning Torah tonight, our farbringing tonight, should have Refuah Shalema L'mayla Mederach HaTeva. So tonight is a special night. Tonight is the yard site of the Tanya, of the Alter Rebbe, Chav Dal Tevis. So it is very special to be able to sit here over tonight and to be able to learn Tanya on the yard site of the Baal Tanya. We know that it's brought down in Kabbalah and Chassidus that Gan Eden, and this is something that we've mentioned in the past also, Gan Eden is not a monolithic experience, uniform experience for everyone. As we say, tzaddikim ein lahem menucha lo b'olam haza lo b'olam haba. Tzaddikim actually are constantly also ascending higher and higher in Gan Eden, from one madriga to another madriga. And this is constant, every single day. Every single day, the tzaddikim in Gan Eden are going to a higher level in Gan Eden. However, once a year, on the yard site, so the tzaddikim experience, everyone, it's only v'amich kulam tzaddikim, we're all tzaddikim, but all neshamas, they experience that's not halavai, that's a pasuk. V'amich kulam tzaddikim is a pasuk in Yeshaya. So that refers to your true self. Now you have to just reveal the tzaddik within yourself. It's not. If I was saying it, you can argue. That's what Yeshaya says. Doesn't
the Mishnah say that chutz me, whatever?
Why are you focused on that? First of all, are you part of the chutz? You're part of those people who are chutz?
I hope not.
You hope not? Okay. There's a letter from the Rebbe where the Rebbe talks about all the chutzes. A brilliant letter with sources in Nigla and Chassidus and Kabbalah, Medrash, Gemara, Yerushalmi, everywhere. The Rebbe basically brings out that everyone is going to have Ve'elam Haba, even those people about whom it says chutz, with proofs from Kol HaTorah Kula. It's an incredible letter. So, the neshama experiences what's called an aliyah be'ein areich, or you call an exponential or quantum leap in Gan Eden on a yard site. So, as we're speaking right now, the Alter Rebbe is experiencing, it says Yom Hilula. You know that Yom Hilula literally means a day of a chasana. It's a joyous day. It's a day of an incredible aliyah. And when we learn the Torah of the Alter Rebbe, we're connecting to him. Just like when we learn Torah, we connect to Hashem. This is something we learned in Tanya in several different places, in Perek Hey, in Perek Chav, in Perek Chav Gimel. There is no unity with Hashem like the unity that comes to Limud HaTorah. The same thing is Tzaddikim Doimen LeBeiron, that when we're learning the Torah of the Alter Rebbe, we're connecting to the Alter Rebbe.
Rabbi, what the pasuk said?
V'amich kulam tzaddikim.
And what's the end? Le'olam yirshu aretz netzer mata'a ma'aseh yadai litpaer. The tzaddik, when he see we learning in his ilula, ma'aseh yadai litpaer. These talmidim, and I'm very proud of them.
Absolutely, what you're saying is absolutely correct. But it's not only he's proud of us, but we're connected to him. So wherever he's going, we're going to go along on the ride tonight. We're going to go along. Now, we might not feel it. Some of us might not feel it. But
You'll feel it now.
As we've said many times.
You want to feel it? Yeah, I'll give it to you. Here.
But as I have.
He's going to feel it.
As we've said many times, the mashal about the horse, about the horses and the hay, right? As a fair tracht haber is the malachim kemalachim. In other words, because we're horses and we don't feel what's going on, doesn't change the mitzias, doesn't change the reality and the fact of the matter that we're going along on the ride. When we learn the Torah of the Alter Rebbe and connect to the Alter Rebbe. So tonight we're going to start off by learning a little Tanya. We're going to finish the siman, the chapter, and if time allows, and hopefully it will, we'll also bring a little and talk a little more about the Alter Rebbe as we go along. We're in the middle of siman gimel of Iggeres HaKodesh. We're on page 208. And let's recap what we've talked about up until this point. We're talking here in this letter, the Alter Rebbe is talking about the greatness of mitzvahs hatzedakah. the greatness of tzedakah. In order to understand the greatness of tzedakah, we have to first understand really what is the function of every single mitzvah. So the Rebbe explains that every single mitzvah is l'shem yichud kutchabrichu u'shchinte, and the words that the Rebbe uses over here in this perek, that means that every single time we're doing a mitzvah, we are connecting the infinite light with the finite light of Hashem. Kutchabrichu is the infinite light, the finite light is the shchinte, and as the Rebbe describes it, we are creating a levush for the gufa. We are creating a garment for the body. The body is the limited light, which is the 10 spheres. And then there's the levush, which is the air makif, the transcendent light. And we're drawing down the transcendent light into the system of creation, what's called Seder Ishtalshalus, which is normally comprised only of finite light. However, for us to benefit from this, for that we have to wait for our neshama to go to Gan Eden. Because in Gan Eden, over there, because it's a spiritual world, so over there the neshama, through a levush that it creates for itself, also through the mitzvah, as we discussed last week, when the neshama is in Gan Eden, then it can appreciate and enjoy a little bit of the infinite light, which it itself drew into the system when it did a mitzvah.
Is there an exception to that? After Mashiach, we'll have the infinite light also, correct?
Almost correct. After Mashiach comes, we'll also have the infinite light. As it is said, that in Gan Eden we have the neshama is able to experience a little ha'ara of the infinite light. But that can't be experienced here in this physical world. When Mashiach comes, we're actually going to experience the infinite light in its full glory here in Olam Hazeh Gashmi. So it's much greater. So there's actually 3 stages, as we discussed last week. There is right now in Olam Hazeh, we can't benefit at all from the schar of the mitzvah. Schar mitzvah b'hayal maleka, because we're not kalim for it. In Gan Eden, the neshama can experience a little of the delight. But then, in the time of Tchiyas HaMeisim, all the neshamas, the Gan Eden is going to empty. The doors are going to open. Everyone's coming back down, because over here, then we're going to enjoy that infinite light, the Kutchabrichu, in a way which is in an unfiltered way. The pasuk says, right, that no longer will our teacher Hashem be wearing any garments of our eyes will perceive Hashem himself. However, the exception to this rule, the Alter Rebbe says, is the mitzvah of tzedakah. That the mitzvah of tzedakah, even here in Olam Hazeh, we say we have Peireseha ba'olam Hazeh. That over here there are holes. Remember we spoke about there's holes in the garment. That's why it's compared to armor. That's why Vayilbash tzedakah kisirian. There's holes in the armor because some of the light filters down, and tzedakah, we can experience the reward down here in this world. When we say we can experience the reward, that means that the oir of Hashem, the light of Hashem, which we create through a mitzvah, actually filters down here in this world, which is why the mitzvah tzedakah is universally appreciated. Because its light actually illuminates this world over here in Olam Hazeh Gashmi. That's what we spoke about last week. And now we're going to turn our attention to the second part of the pasuk with which we started. This letter is based on the pasuk. The Alter Rebbe begins the pasuk in Yeshaya, "Vayilbash tzedakah kisirian," that Hashem wears tzedakah like a coat of armor, which we already spoke about. And the next words are "V'koivar Yeshua bereishai," and he wears a helmet of Yeshua on his head. What is this idea of a koiva Yeshua? Let's look inside, page 208. 10 lines from the bottom. The first words on the line where it says Achmi. However, Miu agoyrim l'yiridas ha'ir v'hashefa lo'ilam haza hagashmi. What is the original cause for the descent of this light into this world? When a person does tzedakah, what is the original cause of the descent of the light into this world? Miyut sfiris hanikroim gufa. We're getting remember, as we mentioned, we get the light from the yut sfiris, which are called the gufa of Hashem. What causes that? Hu hayichud hanal. That is the yichud kuchabrichu u'shchinte that we mentioned earlier. The original, in other words, yes, when we do tzedakah, we're benefiting a little from the oir that comes into this world. But the original thing is that when we do a mitzvah, again, we are causing the unity of the oir hasoiv of kalalman and the oir of a malak kalalman, the infinite light and the finite light. Shi teisefes ha'ara. What does that mean? That extra ray v'ashpa and flow mebechinas oir and soif from the infinite light of Hashem, hamatzil ha'elyon baruch hu. the blessed emanator of all light, biyaser se'es, and that light flows in a much greater flow, much greater power, with much more power, ala arav ashba shebetchilas ha'atzilus ve'ishtalsus v'chulu, much more than the regular flow of energy which enters atzilus and the ishtalsus. V'reish yistei sefes ha'arav ashba, where is the beginning, the very start of this added energy from the infinite light into the finite light? The light, where does it first enter? It first enters the first of the 10 spheres, which is Chachma. So when the Oyer Sof, again, when we do a mitzvah, just to recap, when we do to review, when we do a mitzvah, we're bringing down from the Oyer Sof into the Gufa is the 10 spheres, and ultimately, if it's tzedakah, some of that makes its way all the way down to us, some of that light, some of that energy, and therefore some of the reward. But
I'm confused. You're saying 10 spheres. What's Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, you said Malchus? That's not called a sphere?
these are 7 of the 10.
Oh, okay. But so
The first we are Chachma, Bina, and Das, and then we have
Chesed, Gevurah.
Chesed Gevurah, yeah. The Chesed Gevurah are the emotions, and Chachma, Bina, Das is the intellect. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back. And this is actually something which the Alter Rebbe quotes in Perik Lamed Hey from his teacher, the Masjid Magid. He actually quotes it. It's the one place in Likutei Amarim where the Alter Rebbe makes a direct quote from his Rebbe, where he says over there that all the Oyer Sof, when it enters the system, it only enters into Sfiras HaChachma, because Sfiras HaChachma is a keli for the Oyer Sof. And that is what it means. V'zahu, and this is what it means. V'koiva Yeshua b'reishai. That the helmet of Yeshua is b'reishai, is on his head. So what is the head of Hashem? The head of Hashem is his chachma. And just like we spoke about Vayilbach tzedakah kesirian, that there we talked about the armor, which is covers the entire body. The helmet is that which covers the head. So the helmet covering the head refers to the oyer, the oyer makif, which is why it's called the helmet, the oyer makif, which unites with reishai, with chachma. And what is Yeshua? Yeshua, humaloshin vayisha Hashem el hevel v'menchasei. The pasuk says that Hashem turned to Hevel and to his offering. The pasuk uses the word Vayisha, which is related to the word Yeshua. What is unique about Vayisha, the idea of turning? When we say that one person turns to another, we're talking about the person, him or herself. In other words, actually, to best illustrate this point, I mentioned that it's the yard set of the Baal Tanya tonight. The Baal Tanya had a daughter whose name was Dever Leah, and she passed away very young. That's a whole story all for itself. How she gave up her life for the sake of saving Chassidus, again for a different time, for a different place. And she left behind, when she passed away, she had a child, a 2-year-old son. His name was Menachem Mendel. This Menachem Mendel later grew up to be the Tzemach Tzedek, the 3rd Rebbe of Lubavitch. So this is the grandson of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe raised his grandson. And the story is told that once the Alter Rebbe was sitting with his grandson. The grandson was sitting on his lap, and the Alter Rebbe tells his grandson, "Vu is Zayda? Where is Zayda? Where is Saba?" So the child pointed to the Alter Rebbe to look to his beard. The Alter Rebbe says, "No, that's my beard. It's not Zayda. That's Zayda's beard." Pointed to his arm. "No, that's Zayda's arm." And everything he pointed to, he'd say, "No, that's not Zayda. That's Zayda's this. That's Zayda's that." Okay, conversation finished. Anyways, the kid jumps off the lap of his grandfather. He goes to the door, and he's by the door. He fakes falling and hurting himself, and he screams out, "Zayda!" And Alter Rebbe quickly turns to him, and he said, "Oh, there's Zayda."
Smart.
There's Zayda.
Yeah. How old was he?
I don't remember. A young child.
Smart.
In other words, they're different parts of us. And not only physically they're different parts of us, also spiritually they're different, we're comprised of different elements. But when we say Vayisha, when we say Hashem turned, it didn't mean that Hashem extended a certain part of himself. That means Hashem himself. So the idea of Yeshua is related to the essence of whatever we're talking about turning towards another. V'koiva Yeshua Bereisha means that the Eir in Saf, which is the essence of Hashem, turns and becomes a koiva, becomes the levush, the garment on the head for Chachma. So that's where the Alter Rebbe explains the pasuk. Vayil b'shtaka kesirian. That Hashem wears tzedakah like armor. Because when we do the mitzvah tzedakah, we cause that the guf of Hashem, which is all the spheres, should wear a garment. Yeah, which has little holes in it, which is why we get the light. And where does that originate from? The light which comes through the holes of the Syrian. Where does it originate? The original source of that is the koiva Yeshua Bereishai, is the fact that the Vayisha Hashem, the Soiv Kalaman itself, turns onto the head, which is Chachma. The Soiv Kalaman connects with the head, and that's what causes the Vayil Mashtaka Keserian. V'hu Yiridas Ha'ir V'Hashefa. This is the coming down of the light. The Shin Ayin Nahoirin Shebezoyer HaKodesh. And Zoyer talks about the Shin Ayin Nahoirin, which is the 370 lights, and you'll notice that Shin Ayin is the root of the word Yeshua, and also the root of the word Vayisha. So, without getting into detail about what these the nature of these 370 different lights, this is a reference to the Ur HaSevu Kalaman, the light of the infinite light of Hashem, which comes down on the Koiva Yeshua, which becomes the Koiva, the helmet for Chachma of Atzilus. And as the pasuk says, Yair Hashem panav elecha. That what are we looking for? That Hashem's pnimius, his panim, which is his pnimius, should illuminate for us. Yair panav itanu sala. We ask that Hashem's pnimius again should illuminate to us. Itanu who? And how does this happen? How do we benefit from the gili of Hashem's pnimius? Hu ayidei ma'aseh tzedakah. That's through us giving tzedakah. V'zeu, and this is what we say in davening: Zereya tzedakos matzmiach Yeshuas. What's the connection? That through Zerei Tzedakah, through us giving tzedakah, what do we cause? Matzmiach Yeshua, the Koiva Yeshua. We cause the revelation of the Vayisha Hashem, the Shin Ayin Nahoiren, because that should come down into this world. The Alter Rebbe concludes this letter. V'kacha Yair Hashem panav aleim, and this way also Hashem should illuminate His face towards all of you. Tzedkasim emedas la'ad, your tzedakah will stand in your good stead forever. V'karnam tarum. Be Yeshuas, may your fortune be raised with the Yeshua. Again, he's using the word Yeshua, Matzmiach Karen Yeshua, of the one who causes Yeshua to sprout, Tzemach Tzedakah, the sprouting of Tzedakah, Mahakoiva Yeshua Hanal, from the helmet of Yeshua mentioned earlier, Kenefesh Tidirashanu, this is the wish of the one, of the person, of the soul, that's seeking only good for you. And with this we've concluded Siman Gimel of Iggeres HaKodesh. Yes.
I have a question. You said before, last week, that tzedakah tatzil mimavet. It means you have the sachar, little sachar. That's the only mitzvah that you have, that you know what is sachar. But we have also kibud avayim. Leman ta'arichun yamecha. If you make kibud avayim, you have long life. Here we have also the sachar.
The one who says Char Mitzvah B'Hayal Maleka, which is Rabbi Yaakov in the Gemara and Chulin, he understands that the reward for Kibbud Avayim and also Shiluach Hakan, he says it's all in Olam Shekulei Toiv, Olam Shekulei Aruch. L'man Yarichun Yamecha, he says it's talking about, not here, not here.
Okay.
Okay, L'chaim L'vracha.
Fine.
Yeah, but that's used as a proof of Tchias HaMeisim also.
So either way, it's not B'Hai Alma, it's not in this world. In Tchias HaMeisim, we're going to get schar for all the mitzvahs. Either way, it's not in this world in Olam Hazeh until Mashiach comes. So it's either in Gan Eden or in Tchias HaMeisim, but not here, not now. Chaim L'vracha. Sorry. Maybe later. There's a story about the Alter Rebbe which was told by the Frierdiker Rebbe. He says the Alter Rebbe had a silver snuff box.
Silver what?
Snuff box.
What's
Summit.
Snuff.
Besamim?
Tabak. No, not besamim.
No.
You ever went? No.
Tabak.
You ever went to a shul? Come on, you're of the age you should go on to a shul where people pull out a little of the tobacco and they smell it.
Yeah.
Shabbos, not the only.
Tabak.
Yeah, tabak, exactly. Yeah. A tabak pushka, exactly.
Strong. Sneeze.
At the kotel you find people doing
But this was given to him as a present by one of his Hasidim, but it didn't have a cover. Why is that? Because when the Alter Rebbe received it, he said, there is one aver in the body, there's one limb in the body that doesn't have tivus, the nose. And you want to give the nose tivus also? This is what he said. Maybe he's talking about from the five senses. We like to hear lashon hara, and the mouth obviously has, and the eyes has. The nose, we don't usually walk around thinking all day, desiring pleasant aromas. Okay, I'm not saying there is no pleasure in it, but it's not of the most active tivus. And I says, now you want to cause you want to fasht up this with tivus also. So what did he do? The Alter Rebbe removed the cover. The cover was made up of silver, but how do you say, straight polished silver. And he used the cover for a mirror for his tefillin. When he put on tefillin in the morning to be able to see that the tefillin was exactly in the middle. So he had this snuff box, but it didn't have a cover. Many years later, there was a Farbrengen by the Tzemach Tzedek who we just mentioned. Tzemach Tzedek who the Alter Rebbe passed away in Chav Dalet Teves of the year 1813. The Tzemach Tzedek became Rebbe around 15 years later, in the year Tafkuf Peches, which would be 1827. And a chassid mentioned about this story. One of the chassidim by the Farbrengen said how the Alter Rebbe had a snuff box and he broke off the top and he used it for tefillin. And the Tzemach Tzedek said, no, that can't be. It can't be that my grandfather broke off the cover, even though that he wasn't there, because my grandfather never broke anything, not himself and not others. It must be that there was a chut, there was like a metal thread in the hinge. The Alter Rebbe removed that chut, removed that thread, and therefore slipped off the top, because my grandfather never broke anything. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek said about the Zeder. The Rebbe spoke about this story on more than one occasion. And the Rebbe talks about how this story, in a way, epitomizes the Alter Rebbe. And what the Alter Rebbe was trying to accomplish is that we shouldn't break. Not ourselves, not others, and not even a snuff box. In other words, not forget, when we say ourselves and others, we're talking about Medaber, we're talking about Yidden. Not even a doimim. We don't break things. We weren't put here in this world to break. We were put here in the world to fix. And in essence, really, the entire Hasidus Chabad is about that. The entire Chassidus Chabad is about the idea of dira b'tachtonim. We've spoken about this many times, how this is the central defining concept, which the Alter Rebbe, philosophical concept which the Alter Rebbe introduces us in Tanya, which is that Hashem wants to have a dwelling place in this world, in the tachtonim. He doesn't want the world to be broken. It's not that he wants us to abandon the world or break the world and to experience some sort of Gan Eden, or some sort of spiritual existence. We're put in the world, l'saken, asher-bara lakim lasais, l'saken, we're put over here to fix ourselves. And the same is true also in terms of our own personal avodah, which is the whole idea of Chassidus Chabad, is not to break ourselves. It's not that I should be at odds with Hashem, and my guf and my nefesh habahamis want one thing, and I have to break myself. But the ultimate point where we're going with the ultimate place where we're trying to reach in our avodah is where we learn enough Chassidus, that we have enough Chabad, Chachma, Bina, and Das, that we actually transform ourselves. Not that we break ourselves, we don't have to break ourselves, but rather because we transform who we are and we become godly beings. To bring out this point a little further, I know today is Chav Dalet Teves, And it is the Yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe, but in 2 weeks from now, to be precise, 2 weeks from the Shabbos is Yud Shvat. Yud Shvat is the Yahrzeit of the Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who passed away on Yud Shvat in the year 1950. We've spoken about this in previous years, how in the Frierdiker Rebbe is a remarkable person that he arrived in America in 1940, escaped from Nazi-occupied Warsaw, and arrived in America. And he was a disabled and very, very ill person. He had suffering from multiple sclerosis, and he suffered at least one stroke, maybe even more, back in Poland. And he was in a wheelchair. He couldn't speak in a way that most people were able to understand because his speech was slurred by the stroke. And nevertheless, the Frierdiker Rebbe took it upon himself, embarked. In other words, that was a time when there was a big influx of Gedolei Yisrael into America in the few years before and the few years afterwards, while everyone devoted themselves to rebuilding their particular yeshiva or their particular shul. The Frierdiker Rebbe immediately, with pretty much no resources and no chassidim and no money, I'm exaggerating a little in each one of these areas, he had a handful of chassidim, he had very, very little money, on revitalizing Torah, and can't say revitalizing, it was never vital, on vitalizing Torah and mitzvahs in America. And he started opening up schools, day schools in different cities. He opened up a publication house. Today we have the Chabad publishing house, Khas. You might have, right? So today they print Chassidus. When it was originally established by the Frierdiker Rebbe in 1940, 1941, it was to print textbooks for to teach children how to read Hebrew. Mavil Kriyas was printed, Talks and Tales. It was later there was also that publishing house was also used for Chassidus, but with the vision and the dream of the Frierdiker Rebbe, again, a person who was broken in every which way, to come to America and to take America head on. And here we are, 80 years later, and we see that the Peiros and the Peiros, right? The Frierdiker Rebbe sent one of his shluchim to the Bronx. It was Rabbi Altein back in the 40s to open up a school over there. My father learned in that school. That school was the Frierdiker Rebbe sent to open up over there. That's and that wasn't only New York. It was in Worcester, and it was in Chicago, and it was in Newark, and it was in Rochester, Buffalo. All these, he was opening up, and he barely had people. Like today, you send a shliach to the Lubavitch sends a shliach somewhere. That's it. Then the Frierdiker Rebbe couldn't afford that. He would send 2 bachrim someplace. They opened the yeshiva, and after a year, he would send them somewhere else. Get the yeshiva off the ground, and now I'm going to send you to another place to open another yeshiva. He didn't have anyone, and he didn't have money also. But because of his speech impediment, so towards the end of his life, we're talking about the late 40s, the Frierdiker Rebbe stopped saying Maimarim. And instead, in advance of a day when he would say a Maimer, so the discourse, he would write a Maimer and would have it published, and the Chassidim would learn it on the day of that Yom Tov, or that special day in the calendar. Yud Shvat is the yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe's grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivka. So in honor of that day, the Frierdiker Rebbe gave, in advance of that day in 1950, Yud Shvat fell out on the Shabbos. In advance of that day, the Frierdiker Rebbe gave out a mimer called Basi Lagani to be printed. In fact, the Rebbe, I believe the last time that the Rebbe saw the Frierdiker Rebbe was when he went Friday afternoon into the Frierdiker Rebbe's room. He describes how the Frierdiker Rebbe was sitting and saying, the Siddur was open to Pasach Aliyah before Shabbos. And the Rebbe gave him the mimer, and the Frierdiker Rebbe smiled. That's why, if I remember correctly. And the next morning, Shabbos morning, the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away. It was nostalgic. Yud Shvat. So the Rebbe saw this mimer, Basi Lagani, as the Frierdiker Rebbe's legacy and his message moving forward. 1 year later, the Rebbe accepted the leadership of Chabad, and the Rebbe accepted it by saying a mimer, Basi Lagani, based on the mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And every year after that, the Rebbe would say a mimer on Yud Shvat, also Basi Lagani, based on the mimer Basi Lagani had 20 chapters, and every year he would focus on a different chapter. The mimer Basi Lagani is really a very foundational mimer in terms of telling us what we're doing here, what our job here is in this world. It begins with the words Basi Lagani, which means I've come to my garden. It's a pasuk from Shir Hashirim, where Hashem says He's come to His garden. What does it mean, His garden? So Shir Hashirim says it's talking about Olam Hasa. This is what Hashem said when He came to this world, to Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, when He came down over here in this world to give us the Torah, and then later Hashem once again settled here in a more permanent way when the Yidden constructed the Mishkan. So at that point Hashem says, Basi Lagani, I've come to my garden. And as the Medrash says, really what Hashem is saying is, I've returned to my garden. Because I used to be here. When I created the world, I was here. And then I was kicked out. Because there were 7 Averis, starting with the Chet Sadas, and then there were 6 subsequent Averis as enumerated in the Medrash, which caused Hashem to leave the world and go, Hashem's presence to leave the world and go higher and higher. And then there were 7 Tzaddikim who reversed the trend and started bringing Hashem back down until Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the 7th, he brought Hashem back down here. And when Hashem comes back down, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, He says, Basi Lagani, I've come to my garden. What does it mean, my garden? It means that this world belongs to Hashem. Everything belongs to Hashem. Why does Hashem have to say that? Why is it necessary for him? He could have said, I've come to a garden or the garden. We know everything belongs to Hashem. But when you say mine, there are two different ways of understanding or defining the word mine. Let's talk about when you say my house. Now, my house could mean ownership. This house belongs to me. It's my house. I have the deed, I have the title. But when you say, let's say, my home it's not a statement of ownership. My home means this is where I live. This is the place that I call home. And when I call someplace home, there's a very personal attachment that I have to it, regardless of whether I have the deed to this particular property or not. It's my home. I invest in my home. I spend a lot of time choosing the exact floor that I want for my home, making sure the sink is the exact sink that I want, that I'm comfortable with, and the moldings on the ceiling should be exactly correct. I borrow money if necessary to build the house or to refurbish the house, and if one person doesn't lend me the money, so I go to someone else to borrow the money. But upon him, this is because of the relationship I have with my house. I can have another house which isn't my home, it belongs to me, and I don't care what kind of floor is in there, what kind of sink is in there, or I don't know, because it's not my home. The same thing is also, everything belongs to Hashem. But when Hashem says Basi Lagani, He's not making a statement that this world belongs to me, but this world is my home, it's my garden. This world is Hashem's garden. So when we're talking before about the Alter Rebbe saying, or the Tzemach Tzedek saying that my grandfather wouldn't break anything, why would you want to break something in Hashem's garden? It's a different perspective, a different view of the world. And the purpose is that Hashem, He came back down here into this world, and that becomes then reenacted in every single one of us. And every single one of us, as we know, the pasuk says, "Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'soichem." Which means that every single one of us has to become a Mishkan to Hashem, a Beis HaMikdash to Hashem. And how do we accomplish that? How do we make that Basi Lagani should be, Hashem should say Basi Lagani into you and into me and to everything, because we're a Beis HaMikdash? And the answer is through what's called Iskafia and Ishapcha, through suppressing and ultimately transforming the Nefesh HaBahamis. Using the negativity within ourselves and transforming it to serve Hashem. And the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about this, how we see this throughout the Mishkan. Number one, what was the main avodah on the Mishkan? It was karbanos. What is a carbon? You take a behema and you bring it as a carbon to Hashem. And that was the Gili Hashchina. How did we get the Gili Hashchina? It was through Karbanis. In your personal Beis HaMikdash, how do you have Hashras Hashchina? How do you get Hashem to reside? It's through your behema. Not to break the behema, but to bring it as a carbon to Hashem. To cause that the behema should become subsumed in the heavenly fire, which is what happens by a carbon. The heavenly fire is the love of your neshama that you have, your neshama has for Hashem. That should also consume your behema, your nefesh bahamis, so that all of you begins to love Hashem. And the Friedrich points to other elements of the Mishkan. The Mishkan was...
So you're not looking at as the behemoth as a slaughter. You're looking at it goes up to Hashem.
Yeah. The Mishkan was made up of Kerushim, which are made up of Atzei Shittim. The Friedrich points out that the word Keresh is the same letters as the word Sheker. Mm-hmm. And the word Shittim is the same root as the word Shtus. How do you build the Beis HaMikdash? Take your Sheker and take your Shtus and transform it into a Mishkan for Hashem.
How do you do that?
Which is you're going to have to learn the mimer. We're not going to be able to do the whole mimer right now. But it's a radically different understanding when we look at ourselves and at our flaws and our nefesh bahamis and the shtus that we all have, as the Gemara says, Ein adam ever avera ele imke nichnas beiru shtus, and the sheker, and we're like, okay, I have to break myself. I have to deny myself. I have to just serve Hashem despite all of that. But the truth is, we don't serve Hashem despite that. We serve Hashem with that. As the Friedrich Rebbe explains in the Maimer, we take our shtus and we transform it into shtus dikdusha. Shtus dikdusha means when we serve Hashem in a way which goes above and beyond what seichel, what logic tells me that I have to do.
Did you say shtus and shittim is connected?
Yeah.
How?
It's the same root.
You know what's in the Kodesh HaKodeshim with the Kohen Gadol?
I'm listening.
Shittim, Sotum. I'd say shittim is the same thing as Sotum.
Okay, it's really a similar idea to what we're talking about. But this is a different perspective on whole Ilam Haza. We were put over here not to break but to fix. Not to deny and to ignore and to suppress, but rather to use every single element of this world over here in order to be able to serve Hashem. And it is here that Hashem wants to have his dira b'tachtoinim. It is here where he wants to be present. He wants to be present in this world. He wants to be present in my heart and in your heart. And not that we endure this world and then we go up to Gan Eden and have a better place. But to the contrary, it's about fixing this world. What we call tikkun olam, l'sakin olam b'malchus shin daled yud. And really this idea is also expressed in the letter which we just learned. Alter Rebbe is talking about the value of the mitzvah of tzedakah. And he says, what is the greatness of the mitzvah of tzedakah? It's the only mitzvah whose benefit is felt here in this world. It's the only mitzvah that fixes this world in a way that we can perceive. The truth is, every single mitzvah fixes the world. Which is why, when Mashiach comes, Taka will be able to experience the reward and the benefit of every single mitzvah over here. But in Galus, while we're in Galus, the one mitzvah which does fixing over here in a way that we can see is the mitzvah of tzedakah, and that's what's special about the mitzvah of tzedakah. Once again, it's all about fixing as opposed to denying and suppressing, which was the idea of the Alter Rebbe. Once again, and the big chiddush of the Alter Rebbe is transformation rather than fighting with oneself. And that's something which is true in every single one of us. It's true within ourselves that if there are negative tendencies that we have, instead of trying to run away from them, we have to realize who gave me these negative tendencies. Who gave me the shtus? Who gave me the sheker? It's Hashem. How can I use these very same character traits? How can I use them for something positive? How can I use them to serve Hashem? How can I make out of the behema a carbon? How do I make out of the shtus, the atzei shittim, the krashim? And that's really our job here in this world, as the Alter Rebbe expressed it, the idea of fixing rather than what we call breaking or being mevatel. It's not about being mevatel elam hazeh, but it's about being mehapach elam hazeh. And this connects to an idea, as we mentioned before. Basi Lagani had 20 chapters. So in 1951, the Rebbe said a Maimer on which was devoted to explaining chapter 1, 1952, chapter 2, until 1970 when the Rebbe finished, and then he started a new cycle. 1971, he began again chapter 1 with different explanations on chapter 1. 1972 was different explanations on chapter 2. This year, following that cycle, because we are right now in year 71, since the passing of the 71 years, right? So we're right now in cycle number 4, year number 11. In other words, if you start from 1951 and then you 20 in 20s, so the first one ended in 1970, the second one ended in 1990, the next one ended in 2010, and now we're at chapter 11. So by Chabad Hasidim, in preparation for Yud Shvat, and on Yud Shvat, what we do is we'll go back and this year is a focus on chapter 11. So the Rebbe said on this 4 Mamarim, 3 Mamarim in the year 1961, and 1 Maimer in the year 1981. Why 3 and 1? So usually the Rebbe said 1 Maimer on Yud Shvat. But if Yud Shvat fell out on a Friday or on a Shabbos, then it was a little different. Because then, so for example, that year 1961, so Yud Shvat fell out on a Friday. So the first Maimer the Rebbe said was Friday night. Interestingly, the Rebbe said it in middle of, between Kabbalah, Shabbos, and Ma'ariv. The minion stopped, and the Rebbe said the Maimer Basi Lagani. And then the Rebbe Farbring Shabbos during the day and said a second Maimer. And then Matzah Shabbos, the Rebbe Farbring again, because on Shabbos people couldn't come from around the city. You know, today Chabad is more or less concentrated in Crown Heights, but back then it was more all over. People lived wherever they can afford, and people had to come in. So the Rebbe Farbring again the third time. So the Rebbe said a third Maimer. So that's what we're learning this year is the Mamarim from 1961, the Mamarim from 1981. So the Maimer of 1961, the Rebbe, he brings down an idea from the Mezritcher Magid, which is connected to this week's Parsha. An interesting feature of the Mamar and Basi Lagani is that in every Maimer, the Rebbe would quote every single one of the Rebbes. In the not every Maimer the Rebbe said, but on Yud Shvat, in the Basi Lagani Mamarim, the Rebbe would quote the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Magid and the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbe Rashab, and the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe would quote every single one of them in the Maimer. So the Rebbe quoted something that it says from the Mezritcher Magid, the Magid of Mezritch. In this week's Parsha, we have that Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Zeh Shmi Lo'elam V'Zeh Zichri L'Dor Dor. And on this Chazal tell us, Zeh Shmi Lo'elam, as Rashi brings down, Choser Ksiv, the word La'olam is missing a Vav. And why is that? Because the word La'olam without the Vav, it's like the word Helam, hidden. Helam, which means that Hashem says, Zeshmi, this is my name, but La'olam, tell them they should hide my name. Which means that we know that Loik Shem Shani Nikra, Ani Nichtav Ani Nikra. That Hashem says, my name is written in one way, but articulated and pronounced in a different way. The name is written in Yud Kei Vav Kei. And L'Poel, when we say Hashem's name, we say the Aleph Daled Nun Yud. What is the reason for this? So the Maggid of Mezritch explains the name as it is written is Yud Kei Vav Kei, because that is the essence. That is, we know the Yud Kei Vav Kei is what's called the Shem HaMeforish, the Shem HaEtzem. It is the essential name of Hashem. That is Hashem's essence. But the name as it is Nikra, as it is said, as it is articulated, or as it is revealed, it's not the same. Because in this world, in this limited world, we can't have the revelation of Hashem's essence. So written, it is as is. But to speak it out and reveal it into the world, for that we have the name of Aleph Daled Nun Yud. And what is the name Aleph Daled Nun Yud? This is something which we learned about in Shar Yichud V'Amunah. That represents the name of Adnus. Adnus means Hashem as He is a Odoin, as He is a master. Hashem as He is a master, by the way, which relates to the sphere of Malchus. That means that Hashem's energy, as it is configured already and as it is already contracted, and becomes a Odoin, and becomes a master over creation. Hashem's essence isn't a master over creation. Hashem's essence is utterly removed from creation. You can't say He's a master, because a master implies some sort of relationship with the servant. Hashem's essence is utterly transcendent. So what can be revealed in the world? What is Nikra? Which part of the name can be revealed? is only the name Aleph Dal Nun Yud, not the essence of Hashem. And the Mezritcher Magid connects this with the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which says, Avad Shema, Negad Shema, Avad Shema. Which literally means that someone who wants to stretch out their name, loses their name. Someone who wants to is busy self-promoting, self-advertising, ultimately loses their reputation. And then Mezritcher Magid says that you could say, Negad Shema, Avad Shema is talking about the name of Hashem. That when Hashem's name is Negad, is drawn into the world, Avad Shema gets lost. Because this world is not a keli for it. This world cannot is not a receptacle for Hashem's name, the name of the essence. So that's why when Hashem's name is drawn into the world, it gets lost. And instead, what do we have? The name of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, not the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Magid continues and says, however, there's one exception to this rule, which is the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he goes into Beis Kodesh HaKodesh, and there, with a whole hispashtus agashmius, in other words, a complete divestment of all physical, of everything physical, he's like a malach. At that point, we know that the Kohen Gadol would say, actually, Shem HaMefeirish, as we say in the Avodah on Yom Kippur, right? Rakayin and Va'am, they would hear the Shem Mefeirish Yotzim Epi Kohen Gadol B'Kedusha V'Tara. Why was the Kohen Gadol able to say the name? Because when you reach that Matareg of the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur, what's called the level of Hispashtus Agashmius, so at that point, you can have even the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei can be revealed in this world also. That's what the Magid says. So the Rebbe asks, what is the logic behind this? The etzem of Hashem, the essence of Hashem, what we call Atzmus Umhus, is as removed from the spiritual as he is from the physical.
As a what?
He is as removed from the spiritual as he is from the physical. He transcends both equally. There is nothing that is nearer to him or closer to him. So how do we say that the Kohen Gadol, when he becomes, he achieves a more spiritual state, and suddenly he becomes a keli, he's able to reveal the essence of Hashem in this world? Because he became more spiritual, and when you're more spiritual, then suddenly you're able to have a connection with Hashem. Spirituality also was removed from Hashem. You know, the famous, it's brought down a Chassidus, and we've mentioned several times, that it says, Ram al kol goyim Hashem al hashemayim kavoide. The goyim think, Ram al kol goyim, the goyim think that Hashem is Ram, Hashem is very lofty, al hashemayim kavoide. So therefore his glory and his honor is to be relegated to the heavens, to the spiritual realms. That's what the Goyim say. The truth is, however, what does the pasuk continues? The truth is that for Hashem to look down at heaven or at earth, at the spiritual or at the physical, is hamashpili, is a great degradation for him. It's not to say that Hashem is at home in the spiritual worlds is a degradation for Hashem, because Hashem transcends everything equally. So what does it mean that the Kohen Gadol, because he reaches a Hispashtus Agashmius, that he's able to relate to the Shema Etzem, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, as it is? So the Rebbe explains, it's not the fact that the Kohen Gadol was able to reach a great spiritual heights that causes him to be able to connect to the essence of Hashem. It's the combination of the opposites. It's the fact that he, as a physical being, is able to reach such spiritual heights that touches the essence of Hashem. In other words, the purely spiritual malachim can't reach the essence of Hashem. But the Kohen Gadol was a basar v'dam. And for such a person to reach such high spiritual levels, when he fixes himself to the point, not breaks himself, but fixes himself to the point that the physical becomes absolutely one with the spiritual, that is a keli for the essence of Hashem. And the same thing as we see in the Kodesh HaKodashim, where the ultimate revelation of Hashem was we say over there, the biggest miracle was that Makim Ha'aron Einei Min Hamida. What do you mean, Makim Ha'aron Einei Min Hamida? That means the space of the Aron didn't take up any space. Now there are many miracles that happened, but this one takes the cake. Why does it take the cake? What's so special about this miracle?
It's contradictory to itself.
What's the contradiction? The contradiction is,
does it have space?
if you want to say the Aron was spiritual and didn't take up space, okay. I get that.
It was physical.
Right? We say the Aron Neisa, but you want to say it didn't take up any space because it was so spiritual, I get it. But if the Aron didn't take up any space, then you weren't yoytze the mitzvah of the Asu Aron Atzei Shitim, because the Torah says it has to be Amasayim v'chetzi and Ama v'chetzi. It had to take up it. Makim ha'aron. Doesn't say ha'aron enim and amida. Makim ha'aron. The space of the Aron did not occupy space. Nimna ha'nimnois. It's the ultimate contradiction over here. And the same thing is, we want not for a malach to be spiritual is not a big deal. And when a malach is spiritual, he doesn't connect to Yud Kei Vav Kei. But when a physical person is a malach, that's Makamar Einim and Amida. He's physical, but at the same time, he reached that state of Hispashtus Agashmis. And that connects to Hashem himself. Yeah.
Because Hashem is not time and space. So that's how he's saying it. Hashem has no time.
Hashem is above and beyond time and space. But the truth is, spiritual also is above time and space.
Right.
But this is even more than that. This is the combination of time and space and higher than time and space together. Anything spiritual is higher than time and space. But here we have the combination. And it's ultimately the reason why Hashem created the world, Tevadir B'Tachtoina, means that when this world becomes a keli, for Elikus, we reach the highest level. But that's when this world becomes a keli. If we try to escape and become malachim, if we think that the tachlis is in Gan Eden, we're missing the point. The point is over here on a shama beguf, in a makim, in this world, to utilize the makim of ourselves and the makim of this world to be a dira for Hashem, not by negating the world, but by transforming the world into a higher place. And this is also expressed in an interesting Torah of the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe quotes in Hayom Yom of Yud Aleph Tishrei. With Alter Rebbe, it says like this: Matzah Yom Kippur Tafkuf Nun Vav. So that would be 1795 in Liyajna. So the Alter Rebbe said a Torah in public, and as was his custom back then, it was a short Torah. You know that after the Alter Rebbe left prison. So that's when he started saying much longer Ma'amarim. The longer Ma'amarim we have is from afterwards. So this is still, the Alter Rebbe went to prison in the year 1798. This is from the year 1795. And the Torah of the Alter Rebbe then was in the Pasuk, Mika Hashem Elokeinu b'chol kareinu elav. So on this Chazal Talas, it says, the Pasuk says, who is like Hashem, who listens to us whenever we call out to him? So Chazal says, elav v'lo midai. So we have to call out to him. Not to Hashem's midas. We know very famously, you're not allowed to daven to one of Hashem's midas, you're not allowed to daven to a malach, you're not allowed to daven to anything other than Hashem himself. So the Pardes, Rav Moshe Cardaviro on the Pardes, he says, what is a love? What does it mean to daven to Hashem? The a love is the oyer of Hashem, the energy and the light of Hashem, which enters the kalim of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. In other words, we know that in Atzilus there's the oiris and there's the kalim. Not getting into the length, we spoke about Alan Sheikh V'Amunah. We can't, in the time we have right now, we can't exactly explain Eris and Kalim, but Kalim is, the Kali is Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Netzach, Chod, Yisoid, Malchus, and Chacham Bin Adas, and the Oyer is the Oyer of Hashem that enters into them, like the Neshama to the Guf. So the part that says, when it says a love, that we have to call out to Hashem, that means we can't call out to the Midah. We can't call out to the Keli of Chesed, the Keli of Gvura. We can't turn to Hashem's Chesed or Gvura. We're talking to the energy of Hashem, which is within the Midas. That's what the Pardes says. But the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov says, this is the Rebbe saying that, the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov says that a love is the godliness which is in the Kalim of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Not the oir, not the light that enters the kalim, but the godliness that's in the kalim itself.
What is godliness as opposed to or?
That means
They're both the same.
Just like the neshama and the guf. There's the neshama, there's the guf. When chas v'shalom the neshama leaves the guf, so there is no oir in the guf anymore. If there was no oir, the guf wouldn't exist. In other words, the guf has its own godly energy of its own. The same thing is in Atzilus. There is the light of Hashem that enters the finite kalim.
Finite kalim.
And then there is the actual light of Hashem, which causes the keli to exist. Not the neshama, not the
I mean, at the infinite level.
The act, this is what's called the Oyer HaMugbal. What I'm not getting into the details. What is the depth over here? The Paradis is saying that what? The Paradis is saying that when we're davening to Hashem, we're davening to the Oyer which is above and beyond. The main thing is the Oyer which is above and beyond any limitation, the Oyer which enters the Kelim. And the Baal Shem Tov says even deeper than that. No, we have to look at Hashem and realize that Hashem isn't only in the Oyer. Hashem is in the Kelim also.
It's all Hashem.
Yeah.
Lock, stock, and
Oh,
barrel.
don't forget about the Keli. Don't say the Keli isn't important, it's all about the Oyer. Don't say Olam Haza isn't important, it's only about the Oyer. No, in Olam Haza there is that godliness also, because Eined Mulvadi. And Eined Mulvadi is expressed when every single element in this world is fixed and transformed, not when it's negated in favor of the higher Oyer that there was. And this was the idea, this is what the Baal Shem Tov was looking, the Alter Rebbe, his job was to get this idea of tikkun, of fixing, whether it's fixing ourselves and every single one of our midas, and whether it's the whole idea of Chassidus is brought on as l'shanos teva midas, is to change the midas, not to suppress the midas, to change it. Whatever midah you have, it should be used not for kedusha. In the world also around us, and this is a journey that began with the Alter Rebbe, and we know, as we mentioned earlier, that the Maimer of the Friedrich Rebbe, which he gave out for Yud Shvat, says, at the very beginning of the Maimer, it says that there were 7 generations until Moshe, who was the Shvi, who was the 7th one, V'chol HaShvi in Chavivin, and all the 7ths are precious. So the quote from the Medrash. So he was the one who brought the Shekhinah down here all the way. Avram started the process, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who finished the process. A year later, when the Rebbe officially accepted the Rebbe, and he said his Maimer Basilgani, the Rebbe said, "You have to look at this message. This is crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Our generation is the 7th generation. The Alter Rebbe was the first Rebbe. Then you had the Mittler Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe Maharash, the Rebbe Rashab, and the previous Rebbe, and now it's the 7th generation. And the opening lines of the Maimer, which is the legacy of the Friedrich Rebbe to our generation, what's he telling us? That the 7ths are precious, and they bring the Shekhinah down here. And the Rebbe turns to the Chassidim and says, guys, we're bringing the Shekhinah down here. That's our job. We have to finish the job, which was started by the Alter Rebbe, Avraham Avinu and the Alter Rebbe, in the idea of fixing the world and bringing the Shekhinah down, which, by the way, was a crazy statement, an audacious statement. The Rebbe is sitting in a shtibel in Crown Heights, because that's what Chabad was at that time, was a shtibel. You know, today we look at Chabad as this worldwide, international presence. Back then, Chabad was a shtibel. The shul in which, I don't know who anyone over here has been in 770, upstairs 770, not downstairs, the upstairs shul in 770. Okay? So the room is approximately the size of this room, maybe a drop bigger. That's the big shul where the Rebbe had his Farmrega and Yushvat Tavshin Yud Aleph, addressing a jam-packed crowd of maybe 300 Chassidim. I don't know, 400. I mean, how many people can fit in that room? And the Rebbe turns to the shtibel of Chassidim and tells them, guys, this is it, our generation, we're bringing Mashiach, we're bringing the Shekhinah down over here. Think about the chutzpah of such a statement. And the Rebbe said in that Maimer, he says we should know that even though that we're very special, and we are the 7th generation, but we're not special because we earned it. We're not special because it doesn't say, the Rebbe points out, it doesn't say that the special ones are the 7th. It says 7ths are special, which implies just by the virtue of the fact that you're 7th, that makes you special. So our generation, the 7th generation, it's not a special, we're not special because we earned it or because we did a lot of Avodah. By virtue of the fact that we're the Shvi L'Rishon, we're the 7th ones. 7th from the ones who began the work of fixing everything here in this world. And the Rebbe says, he brings down that the Medrash says that there's twice that Moshe Rabbeinu tried to compare himself to Avraham Avinu. One of them is actually in this week's parsha, when Hashem calls out to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu says Hineni. So Moshe Rabbeinu was copying Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu also answered Hineni, and Hineni means Hineni lekahuna, Hineni lemalchus. I'm ready for kahuna, I'm ready for malchus. Avraham Avinu got it. He got kahuna and he got malchus. Atakoy and Lo'ilam, what's the lashon? Malki Tzedek, right? What? No, the pasuk in Tehillim. where it talks about Avram calls him a kohen, and he's also he got both of them. And the Eibishter told Avram Avinu, Hashem told Moshe, sorry, don't do that. Don't try to compare yourself to Avram Avinu. Moshe, you're great, but Avram Avinu is something else entirely. The Rishon. The Rebbe says that the one whose Yahrzeit we're celebrating, observing tonight, the Alter Rebbe, he was the Rishon. And he says, we should know, don't think you're so great. We know that our entire legacy is that we're Shavi Rishon. Our entire greatness is that the Alter Rebbe opened up the path by giving us a Tanya, which we're learning, and teaching us how to fix and how to make a Dir B'Tachtoinim. And we are the Shvil Rishon. We are here to finish off that job, which the Alter Rebbe started. The job of not breaking, but dafka fixing in ourselves, in the world around us, and using out every single element as a Dir B'Tachtoinim. When we do that, it'll be our generation, the 7th generation, that will bring the Shekhinah down here, L'Poyel Mamish, with Mashiach Tzidkenu. L'chaim L'Vracha.